so we will keep this to an hour. Obviously, our core purpose is to talk about the project presentation materials, but also want to just leave some room for basic conversation. And so to start, we will be doing a question and answer session. And so please do feel free at any point from now moving forward to post questions that you may have about the project presentation materials, about virtual Regeneron ISEF. Go ahead and post them in the chat, and Hunter and Natalie are going to be managing those questions for us so that when the Q&A comes, we can be as efficient as possible in trying to get as many answers to you as we can. So welcome. I believe most of you know who I am, but if not, I should introduce myself. I'm Michelle Glidden. I'm our Chief Program Officer at the Society. And I have the pleasure of working on the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair with several of my colleagues, of which I will call out kind of our core team of those working on ISEF. I also have several other colleagues in our department sitting in, so they're also aware and how to support our fairs, including Reva Ramadori, who's the program manager of the Broadcom Masters program and obviously works with a lot of you. A huge kudos to her and the whole team. We just successfully ran Broadcom Masters virtually in the finals week. Hopefully many of you were able to go in to see the exhibits of those projects and maybe enjoy that award ceremony. My golly, are those kids brilliant and fun to work with and watch. So kudos to Reva and the team on that. But first off, let me go ahead and do short introductions. Maybe not needing introduction, but Sharon, go ahead and introduce yourself tonight.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us, even if it's midnight your time or whatever. I'm Sharon Snyder, and I manage the international fairs and recruit volunteers for International Science and Engineering Fair.
Excellent. And Natalie.
Hi, everyone. I work mostly with the international side of Regeneron ISEF and help support Sharon in her work. I've probably emailed quite a few of you before, so it's nice to see some familiar faces and meet some new ones.
And if you haven't got an email from Natalie, you've definitely got an email from Hunter. Hunter, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm an associate specialist here at the Society. And yeah, you've probably, if you're on the domestic side, you've probably gotten an email from me about the affiliation process. And I also help work with the finalists and finalist questionnaire. So after they've completed their fair process and been nominated, I work with them as well.
And last but not least, Naveed.
Hey, yeah, hi, everyone. My name is Naveed Khan. I am an associate project manager in our programs department here. I work very closely with our IT team to implement all our software and technology we use. So fair dashboard, finalist questionnaire, all those kinds of things. Yeah, so happy to be here.
And he is helping mastermind this meeting. So if you have any tech questions, tech issues, point them to Naveed. So to go ahead and get started, wanted to just share with you some, again, overarching, I don't know how many of you were in the August meetings or not, but as you are now all well aware, we are running Regeneron ISEF this coming May virtually. We will be conducting judging, both grand award judging and special award judging. And so we are signing up special award organizations and we will be facilitating their access to both project presentation materials for the finalists, and then hopefully a means of having some interchange of judging, whether that's through video conferencing, a phone or chat or whatever it may look like with the special award judges as well as the grand award judges. That being said, we have not yet fully finalized our virtual platform / platforms and how we're going to manage that process. What we have had the advantage of doing is, as we're investigating on behalf of our own organization for how we're going to run the Regeneron ISEF, we have also been talking with several vendors who are also very much interested in having you all as clientele. I know many of you are working with many of them. And so I want to take a minute and have Naveed just give a brief update of some of the different organizations who are out there working on virtual judging and registration systems, and who we've kind of discovered as probably the major players, so that if you are still seeking solutions in that regard, we've got some information to share forward. So Naveed, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a link here in the chat. And then I'm going to share my screen and essentially share that document, but that link is there and we can send it out as well after. It's a very brief listing of some of the platforms that we have demoed and seen in a search for our own solutions, but more so what I'm talking about here is how they could work for you. The first two I've listed here are called Student Corner and Project Board. And these are hyperlinked in the document when you go there, or you could just Google them. And those two are both sort of similar in that they're, I guess I say project-based in this description, meaning that the student creates a project and its original purpose, I think, was more for having a place for students to like have all their projects and their account exists after the fair or whatever, and like they can come back to their project, make new projects that aren't associated with the science fair at all if they want to. And Student Corner has a sort of a blend of that and some science fair management stuff. They have and some admin functions like with visibility of projects and different roles. You know, you can add collaborators to projects, some SRC review, that kind of stuff. Project Board was used by Youth Science Canada last year. They have those admin functions. As far as I've seen, they manage most of that, or they have to this point for the ones they've run. But they also did work with Youth Science Canada to do sort of a public presentation of projects, kind of like we did with ISEF, sort of like a lobby, those sort of virtual spaces. They have done some of that. So if you're looking for something like that, they may be able to blend that with also some science fair management and public presentation of projects. Both of those systems are good for that kind of thing. Then the next three I've listed are ZFairs, STEMWizard, and Scienteer. We have seen ZFairs and STEMWizard recently. Scienteer, we have not done a recent demo of, but we have seen it before. And these are all end-to-end like science fair management systems. So everything from like registration, collecting paperwork, through judging, all of that. They function in different ways. I encourage you to reach out to them. They're all friendly, good people, and they'll be willing to work with you, and depends on what will fit your needs best. And then the last two I have listed is iPoster Sessions or / virtual poster session, two different sites, kind of do the same thing. These are very much just display platforms. They're not made for any sort of management of your science fair. But if you, I don't know if there's a school, or maybe if you're just looking for a way looking for something to display posters, you know, separate from, maybe you have your own system for managing your fair already or whatever it may be. Those are both options for that. Sort of only serve one purpose to my knowledge, but they do that thing well. So that's sort of the ones we've seen. I'm sure there's other ones. There's something I've heard called Rocket Judge, but that's only for judging. It's like a mobile app. So I'm sure there's other ones. These are the ones we know of, the ones we've looked at. So hopefully that is helpful to you, and that document is helpful to you. And of course, you can always send any questions you have about any of this to isef@societyforscience.org, and I monitor that inbox, Hunter monitors that inbox, and so we're happy to answer any questions about that.
Right, and if you know of other platforms and you want to share them with your colleagues, feel free to share them in the chat, and we're happy to then distribute that as well. Obviously, every fair has, many have custom systems, just as we do at ISEF and at the Society. So a mix and match of different opportunities. But if you're looking for a solution, those are several that we've that clearly have jumped into the space and are trying to accommodate fairs who are switching to virtual. In terms of our process for the Regeneron ISEF, we will be trying to follow the same basic calendar as we have held previously, and that is affiliation officially will end at the end of December. Obviously, we've urged you to affiliate prior to that. Hunter and Natalie and Sharon are spamming you if you have not responded. If you've not affiliated yet, then we will be looking for you to affiliate no later than December 31st, because we have to switch systems over at the new year. And so we are working now on official party registration, the finalist questionnaire. Those systems will feel and look similar to prior years. They will be our custom built systems that feed out of the fair dashboard. Obviously, official party registration will be different in that the only folks that we will really be asking you to register are your finalists. We will most likely also ask for an adult in charge. We do not currently intend for that person to have to pay any kind of a fee, but we'd like to know the adult that will be supporting the finalist through judging and through any activities that will be going on for the virtual event, to be that support structure as if they were chaperoning them on site. And so in some cases, and maybe in most cases, that will be one of y'all, a fair contact, fair personnel. In some cases, that may not be you. It may be a parent, it may be a teacher. And so we will allow you all to designate that for us so that we know the adult to be in touch with if we're having trouble scheduling or, any number of those kinds of things. Unfortunately, we have not finalized the registration fees for the finalists. It is going to be a nominal fee. And I promise that we'll get that to you by the end of this month, early December. I know many of you have begun asking to manage your budgets. We're talking in the $100-$150 range. We are not talking a significant fee. It really is just to speak to the effort that we will need to take per finalist to get them through all of the processes. And so again, look for final detail on that front. Otherwise, the finalist questionnaire, obviously we won't be asking about their diet or about their needs in a physical sense. We probably will be asking quite a few questions about their tech and trying to understand what kind of Wi-Fi or internet access they may or may not have, the preferences around some of that. We have had some practice in collecting some of that data for running of the virtual Regeneron STS and the Broadcom Masters. And we have found that it's important to both get that information, and then we were providing equipment. What we will probably be doing is leaning on the affiliated fair to loan equipment, find equipment, and or confirm that your finalist has the appropriate equipment to be able to hold a video conference and or at least be online at a particular point in time. And as we identify all of that in the finalist questionnaire, we will be providing checklists and guidelines on what we would be looking for. Obviously, what you can provide and what your area allows will be a unique circumstance. And in some areas, you may not be able to guarantee a solid Wi-Fi connection for where the student lives and resides. So we will be just looking to gather that information as we do that. Right now, we're looking early February at the latest to open up official party and finalist questionnaire, giving ourselves a few more weeks than maybe our typical, but look for that to open generally on the regular schedule. Now I really want to shift over to what we really came for here today, and that is to talk about these project material guidelines. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm not going to read aloud. But I do want to just touch briefly on several aspects of this material. If you've not seen this document, it was sent in a couple of emails. Naveed can probably post either here or in a follow-up email to everybody. We'll post the blob storage link to this as well. But essentially, what we're looking at is number one, Regeneron ISEF paperwork as submitted in the finalist questionnaire. Again, very familiar and similar to what you've done before. Our SRC will use probably their standard system to review all of that documentation. As if the physical project board, the 3 documents that we believe judges will be looking for and that would be required as display are the official abstract, regulated research institutional setting form 1C, and the continuation form 7, obviously the last 2 if applicable to the project. And then in lieu really of the typical triptych science fair project board that you would visit if you were in a physical exhibit hall, where we've got a project presentation, which is upwards of 12, upward limit of 12 pages of a PDF that essentially in some ways is a slide deck. And so we've got some templates for all of that. Then there's what we're calling a quad chart, which is our answer to trying to provide the kind of classic visual summary poster in a format that can be read online. And so a big part of so I'm sorry, let me finish this, then I'll circle back to kind of our reasoning behind all of this. So, and then finally, there's a 2-minute maximum project video. Those are the elements that we're going to require of the finalists to provide to us then have available to the judges. And in some cases, many of these items will also then be part of their public project presentation. Additional optional materials are things that, again, a finalist would have had an opportunity to have at their booth, but they are not required. And those are a video demonstration, simulation, or animation. If their project needs to show movement of some sort, they can have an extra 1-minute demo of that. A research paper, if they've already done one, and they would typically have it at their booth. And then this idea of a lab notebook image or excerpt. So really just maybe a 2-page spread image of a lab notebook. We know that many judges in some disciplines of science still are very much looking for a lab notebook. And so we wanted to offer the opportunity for a student to demonstrate that they had one without really sharing a lot of their IP. And so the answer to that was this very optional lab book kind of image. Again, fully optional, and they don't have to show it, but if they have it and they want to demonstrate that they have it, they can do so. So those are the key elements. And then as you follow through in the document, then there are the appendices of each of those sections with much more detail about some formal requirements of the presentation, and then recommendations, and then some templates. I will say right now the documentation includes 2 templates, one for the science projects and one for engineering projects. We are developing with one of the co-chairs of the mathematics category. We are also creating a template for computer science and math projects. I expect it to look quite similar to the engineering projects, but it may have some subtle nuances to that. So we're going to add that template both for the project presentation and for the quad chart. So look for that to come. That's in development right now, but I didn't want to hold the whole document to wait for those templates. To back up just a little bit and talk to you about our process to get where we are right now. We have been meeting with the Judging Advisory Committee for the last probably 2 months, kind of in bi-weekly, weekly meetings with them. Huge shout out to Chris Gould, who I think is in the room, who has done a lot of this work, but also Chuck Vukotic with the Pittsburgh Regional Science and Engineering Fair, the Glonsingers out of Phoenix, Chris Rodee, who works, I think, a lot with SARCEF, Alicia Martinez, who's in New Mexico, lots of folks who have been guiding our judging processes, Rob Reese, who works with Silicon Valley, lots of folks who have quite a bit of experience and who care passionately for being sure that the students present themselves as well as they can, and that the judges have the information they need to make informed decisions. And so that is really the core purpose of how we've come to the conclusions that we've come to. If we had students just create their typical project board, one, we feel like many competitions are also virtual, and that we may be asking them to create a physical board that then is an image in the background that nobody can read. Or if you take a photo of it and you post it up on a screen, it would take a 300, 400% zoom of it to get to one section of it. And any interview time will be spent zooming to find the spot of the poster that you wanted to see, which is why we went to the 12-page kind of landscape, fill the screen, see as much content, try to use fonts that allow readability on the screen without a lot of zooming. I expect some of that will be restrictive and not provide enough for what a student feels like they need to cram onto a project board. Obviously, brevity sometimes takes a lot more skill than saying a lot. So we may be challenging these students in that way, but we are going to try to stick to that so that we feel like the materials that either are judged during an interview, or in most cases will be a lot of the pre-reading that a judge does in preparation for an interview, is easily viewed on screen and is kind of a palatable way of sharing that information, and in any kind of interchange, being able to get quickly to the core materials that are needed. So that is kind of the core elements that I wanted to talk about. In terms of process, I think I've already stated our SRC process will follow the finalist questionnaire and loading the paperwork kind of per typical. We anticipate that as soon as they clear SRC, they will get some kind of indication that they can start to put their project materials together for us in a place. And then we'll have a display and safety inspection. We are actually meeting with the DNS Executive Committee, scheduled that meeting right before this one. So we will be meeting with them late next week to really start to talk about a checklist for remote DNS inspection of the materials as we've outlined. I know we've gotten some feedback about these presentation materials, and there have been several who have asked whether there is such a checklist. So we are going to task that group to help us get there. And then when we have something, we'll happy to share it forward. It is worth noting at this point that these are guidelines for which we are going to run Regeneron ISEF. You are under no obligation to use any of it for your own fair, right? How you run your fair is how you run your fair. If none of this is applicable for you because you already have a system set up, you already have a process, and this does not align with that, there is no requirement at all that you follow any of these guidelines up until the point that you name a finalist, and then that student will have to do this work. We also are welcome for you to use any pieces or parts of it. You don't need to use it in totality. So if there's a part of it that you really love, but there's, Tim really doesn't like the quad chart, he's not going to use it. That's okay. So folks can make informed decisions about that. The other thing is particularly around the quad chart. We know it's a new concept for many of us, including me, that is used in a lot of governmental contracting. It is a way to show one core visual, but still get some really very brief bullet points on a screen with some visuals. We will be working on creating some samples and probably a couple of sample project presentations of each type as well. Not to suggest that that's the only way to do it, but to provide you again a sample that follows our guidelines and that you can see and share with your students as they're trying to model their own project presentation when they become ISEF finalists. So I think that is all I had to say. So Hunter, are you ready to queue up some questions?
Yes, we've definitely got a few. So the first one is about students and prohibited access to labs or universities during this. And so maybe you could talk about some of the research at home resources we have on our website, but also maybe talk about how that changes the Form 1C and how students are kind of getting around that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, right. So if you go to our website, and I think we've talked about this a little bit before, we have focused our website on looking at research at home. And in the fact that you can do a really amazing project with public data, right? And so there will be a lot of data mining. I expect there will be some behavioral science through online surveys and that kind of thing. Obviously, the challenge there is to be sure that your institutional review board is up and running to support those students. But it is absolutely true. The labs are still closed, right? And so any project that really requires a BSL-2 laboratory circumstance, or even honestly a BSL-1 lab at your high school may be shut down for your students at this point. So we just urge caution when you're working with potentially hazardous biological agents. Many of those types of projects, particularly if you're doing any culturing, are prohibited in a home environment. That remains true. We know that there have been either summer programs and or that there have been high school teachers who have offered to their students, they've designed a project, but they can't actually put their hands on the sample because they're not in the lab themselves. It is okay for the high school teacher to be doing the actual sampling or the running the plates or doing whatever the hands-on part of that has to be done in the safe environment is if your student is shut out from that. All we need to know is we need to know that our judges need to know what part of the design of that project was the students, what part of the analysis was the students, what part of the hands-on was maybe done by somebody else. That's true of some of the summer programs as well, where they may have been given an idea, had hands do the experimentation, and really what they're working with is a data set that may be unique to them, but is still a data set that they're now analyzing and working from and with. Because of all of those things, we're really encouraging fairs, and we will definitely be doing this at ISEF, and that is asking folks to go ahead and complete a regulated research setting or industrial setting Form 1C, so that we can hear from the adults about what portions of the projects were student driven and or student conducted and which parts weren't. So typically, if it's a high school teacher or if it's a remote mentorship, we don't have you fill out a 1C. It's really only used if you're actually been in the setting. But in this case, for this year, we are going to encourage more 1Cs, not less, so that we can have that mentor or that high school teacher speak to the conditions of the experimentation that we might not get that information otherwise. So if you have questions about that, please feel free to email the SRC at societyforscience.org, or any other rules questions you have as it pertains to supporting your students doing research. But that is one thing that we're going to be encouraging. The other thing that we will be posting, and I'm remiss in not having gotten it posted already, and that is that the Colorado State Fair and Courtney Butler did an amazing job of really working with her team around some COVID-19 risk assessment guidelines, and really just speaking to the fact that while we're under the conditions of living that we're under, as a student is conducting research, they really should have some just risk assessment ideas around the COVID-19 situation. That is, if they're in any way of in-person, they should be, they should be social distancing. They should be having folks wear masks. If you're doing behavioral research and you can do it remotely, that's encouraged. If you're in a lab and you've got multiple people coming through still a high school lab, that there's the proper sanitation and process. And so it's just very practical guidelines that we probably all know. It's just been really nicely written up as some guidelines. And I will get that posted this week. It's been on my to-do list for a while now. And it's beautifully written. The SRC, obviously it had been written for the Colorado State Fair specifically. We've written it for the broader audience of ISEF, and we'll be sharing that forward. So that's a long-winded answer to what was relatively short question. So sorry.
The next question is about kind of the cost comparison of the different platforms. So Naveed, you might be able to speak to this, but specifically like ZFairs, Rocket Judge, those other things that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I did see that question. I honestly don't remember all of them offhand. I do know that most of them are pretty flexible. They'll work with you. It's not necessarily a fixed cost for everything. But yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer than that right now.
Yeah, I think from what we understand about their pricing, it is extremely flexible. Most of them are parents of sons and daughters who went through science fair at some point in their livelihood, and they decided to take some of their expertise and turn it to some support of science fair. So often they'll say it's kind of a passion project of their business. That said, some of them are pretty serious service, and so then that may be priced accordingly. But I know most have a sliding scale based on the size of your fair and how many how many services you're using, et cetera.
And the next question is about swag that could potentially be sent to finalists. So maybe you could talk about the medals and certificates that were provided in last year's virtual event and what we're planning to do this upcoming year.
Sure. I have not thought a lot about swag of all the things I've got to worry about. That's not one of them that rises to the top of my list. But I also appreciate how important it is to students. We will definitely do finalist medals again. We did that last year. And those have shipped. And so if you know of a finalist who has not received their medal, have them reach out to ISEF at societyforscience.org, and we'll chase it down or send out a new one. Other than that, I don't know that seriously that the team has had this conversation. And so I would encourage you all to give us ideas, things that you think are important to your finalists. We did produce an electronic certificate and a gold sealed abstract that they then could print. And obviously we could do those things relatively easily again. But if there is something that would absolutely make the difference for your students, I'm happy to hear ideas around that. And we've got a whole events and ops team and a marketing team and all kinds of folks who can work with us on that work.
The next question is about kind of examples of the different templates, whether it's the quad chart or the 12 page kind of presentation. Could you talk about some of the work the JAC is doing there?
Sure. I think our core purpose has been to create these guidelines, right? And I think we've gotten some good feedback around some of the instructions that could be more clear. I think someone suggested, for instance, that the 12-page limitation is a little buried. It took them a minute to find it. So we'll try to pay attention to some of that feedback. And what we'll do is we've got a meeting with the Judging Advisory Committee this Thursday. We'll take feedback from this meeting and from all the written commentary that we've received. There are a couple things that I know that we want to talk about with them. And then my goal will be to kind of finalize the document to the best of our ability. Obviously, once we determine our final platform choices and how that may or may not affect these guidelines, we'll make appropriate adjustments. But otherwise, I think these should be pretty final. Once they're final, then yes, we will work with some volunteers or some old projects or some made up projects, and we will try to create some real samples. And I expect that we could then post those up on our website along with these presentation guidelines to just expand the appendices. But I don't have a timeline for that right now, but we'll be trying to get that done certainly in this year.
And then the next question, I think, was referring to the project presentation, but someone was just asking if diagrams, schematics, graphs, and color could be displayed within that presentation template, and kind of how rigid those guidelines were. So do students have to follow those exact title requirements or section requirements?
Right. So the sections are to speak to the content that is to be in that on those pages, not that they're scripted titles. And yes, absolutely, we anticipate that images and graphics and charts and all of that would be fully in color. I think that right now there is a requirement of a white background with black text. We can look at that. I think that's a requirement. A lot of the guidelines otherwise are recommendations. And so we will look at that as we're creating a sample. We are trying to find the fine balance of making sure it's readable and standardized for the judges so that they are not having a horrific time trying to identify what they're looking at. But likewise, we want the individuality of the choices the student can make to creatively present their project, and that is often a big part of how they present their research. And so we don't want to make it so strict that it's looks all the same, right? And so we can take a look at that. But no, I do not believe that it's intended that you would use those as headers, but rather that those would be the guidelines by which you would be sure you have pages that relate to those topic areas.
Cool. And the next question is about the optional materials. So will judges have the opportunity to review them? Will that be in the interview or just online?
Yeah, so again, to be determined. What our intention is that just as if a judge during the preview of the projects were to walk up to a project booth, we have no idea if they open up that research paper. We have no idea if they click on the video and watch the video. We don't know how much they read of the project board, right? And so similarly, we will be sure that all of these materials are surfaced and available to the judges as if they were to walk up to the student's booth. How much of them they actually read, we can't guarantee you, right? We will be focusing their attention on preview and using the project presentation as the core material that the student is using to present their project, as if to replicate the project backboard that has typically been used in the projects. And obviously the official abstract and the written documentation that we've talked about. So that will be our core guideline. We will also fully inform the judges of all of those materials. If I'm a judge, I'll watch the 2-minute video. I can't guarantee you that they're all going to click on the 2-minute video and watch it. And so we haven't, if a judge is making a choice, we're going to encourage them to read and thoroughly review the project presentation. It is our anticipation that that project presentation will also be what the student can refer to most readily during the interview. But we're also intent that all of those materials would be available just as if they were at the booth. the reality is it's not going to make sense for a student to pop up their research paper and share anything within the research paper necessarily. But we're going to try, and again, we haven't figured out how, so no promises, but we're going to try as if all of those materials are at a student's booth and at the judge and at the student's disposal to make an informed judging process.
And then we've got a question about the math templates and kind of how those are going to be formulated. So maybe you could talk about what the JAC is doing there as well.
I can tell you they're working on one. That's all I know. So I am not the mathematician. Scott Commoners, who is our one of our co-chairs of judging of the math category and has been for several years, is working on that template for us. And as soon as he has provided it to us, I will share it forward. But that's about all I know about it. So I can't share more.
Sorry, I'm muted. It looks like we've got a couple questions about the actual interview process, so finalists with judges. Could you maybe talk about what our goals are for that, and will it be live? Is it going to be one-to-one, kind of those things?
Sure, and if I knew all of those things, I would speak with certainty. Naveed has made me promise not to speak with certainty because we haven't figured it out yet. Our goals around that are that we try to provide video conference interviews for the students. We have had a multitude of conversations among the judging advisory committee about whether that's a one student to one judge, whether it's one student to two judges. What we have guaranteed is that we will have a moderator in whatever video conference room space that we're in, who is probably not a judge or is at least a secondary judge. We're not sure of that, but we're not going to have a one-on-one interaction between a judge and a student and not have a third body in there moderating the circumstances. And so that is one protection that we will put in place. We will also maintain the background checks for all of our volunteers and judges who support the Regeneron ISEF. We will not let that go either, even if the conversations are all going to be virtual. So those are the two assurances that I can share. We also have had very practical application conversations around the fact that video conferencing for some students during the week in which we will probably be doing the judging interview may not be possible, right? Puerto Rico's Wi-Fi is not great, right? And on some days that's just not going to work. In other days it will be beautiful and it'll work. So we are going to have we believe we're going to have to come to a triage circumstance where ideally it's video conference. And if it's not video conference, it's phone interviews. And if it's not phone interviews, it's the WhatsApp or whatever kind of chat back and forth that can happen. And if it's not that, it is review of the project presentation materials as provided or some other alternative. We'll be trying to gather some of that information through the finalist questionnaire. We'll be trying to gather some of the information just by practical application of the experiences you all are having and the feedback you give us about the feasibility of your students successfully undergoing video conference interviews with the states. Sharon Snyder and Natalie will be working with our international affairs and with students whose for which English is not their first language. We will looking for volunteer interpreters, ideally who don't have a relationship with the finalist, but who can support language exchange, which can only be harder in this kind of a circumstance. So that will be also something that we have typically done in person and that we will try to achieve in this process. The judges have talked about a one-to-many, where a student would be being interviewed by 2 or 3 judges in the same kind of instance. At some level, we may do that for a variety of reasons. One, it ensures at least one judge will be there in terms of a timing process, right? To kind of build in for some attrition, but also just to allow for the timing of the circumstances. Right now, with the data that we're receiving through affiliation and the fairs signing up their finalists, we are going to have as big of a fair as ever. Obviously, you all have to have your own events. We'll have to see what your registrations look like and then what ours looks like. But right now, we're looking at 1,400 projects easily that we will be needing to manage. We right now, in our thinking around the timing of all of this, we have given ourselves a 2-week window to do judging. And then we anticipate that then there will be a week, 5 days of events not dissimilar from what we did last year. Well, we have some panel discussions, we have some symposia, we have some social events for the finalists, and then we have award ceremonies. And so our intent is that we use the first 2 weeks of May to figure out judging, and whether that happens in an amazing 2-day span, or if it is spanned across a period of time. We're leaving ourselves open in process to figure that out yet. But that's why our deadlines are still in mid-April, because we believe we may need 2 weeks to achieve the proper level of interviewing or coordination or communication with the finalists for judging.
And I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 more. There's a question about specific troubleshooting resources we'll provide to finalists. So maybe you could talk about what the finalist questionnaire process will look like this year and what we're expecting it to do. And then there's also a couple questions about rubrics being available by February for fairs to use.
Sure. So the rubric question is probably the easiest, and that is that our existing rubric for science projects and engineering projects, I do not believe will change. The core research that the students are doing is the same core research. And so we do not anticipate that the difference in how the students present the materials virtually will affect the rubrics. And so those are posted on our website. They're available to you. We can be sure that we get them out to you. But those we do not anticipate making changes to. Part 1 of that question I've lost now.
I can try to answer that a
Yeah,
little
okay.
bit, maybe. If we're talking in terms of like finalist questionnaire and these project materials, like any normal year, students can email ISEF and we'll help with troubleshooting, at least with accessing their account. And I anticipate we'll have a lot more questions this year about like what should be on the chart and stuff. And so we can try to help with that. If we're talking about when judging is actually happening, we will definitely have a plan for that, a hotline or something, or emails, or even maybe a form. At ISEF, actually recently we have implemented this sort of like text service that we monitor. It's a little different there because we can walk out to the finalists and ask them what's going on, but we're gonna be there to provide tech support. What exactly that looks like right now, we don't know. And we want to have some contingency room, you know, like if everything fails and a finalist misses their interview, we'd like to plan for some space where we could do some makeups or something. But that, again, not entirely sure how that's going to look right now. But yes, we're not going to leave. We're going to do our best not to leave anyone hanging in the dark.
And so before we're finished, I did want to share with y'all some what I hope is good news. And that is that I know in August we spoke of a potential grant application to support fairs who are trying to turn virtual or who are just trying to figure out how to run your fair with all of the challenges that are facing you this year. And so I'm very pleased to announce to you that we have what we're calling an affiliated fair emergency need and COVID-19 transition fund. It will be a grant application available to any affiliated fair in the network who has the need to either pivot to virtual or to appropriately social distance in your venue, or whatever you can think of as an added expense or an added process that you know you're going to experience this year, and that funds from the society could support your work in accomplishing that and holding a successful science fair this spring. The application will open by no later than next Wednesday, November 18th. We will send email communications about it. We will be funding on a rolling basis. And so you are urged that, the best ideas are going to get funded so we can get the money in your hands. We will probably have the application open and the first review happening in the first weeks of December, with the idea that we'll be reviewing them bi-weekly until the money runs out, right? And so obviously we'll be looking at that. The grant will be for up to $10,000 relative to what you need the funds to do. Obviously, if you don't need 10,000, don't ask for 10,000, right? I mean, anyway, more information to come. It cannot be any self-dealing. So you can't pay your affiliation fees. You can't pay your registration fees. You can't obviously fund any coordination back to the society with any of these funds. But you might be able to pay one of the vendors to help you turn virtual. You might, again, be able to get consulting help or support of salaried individuals that you've not had support for, whatever it might look like. And so without putting ideas in your head about what you know best about what funding you might need, it is open to all of the affiliated fairs, including fairs who have not been able to affiliate because they don't believe that they have the funds to affiliate this year. Acceptance of the funds means that you agree to affiliate and run a science fair this coming spring. But look for more details and information as we open up that application. We have tried to intentionally keep it simple. It is not a complicated grant application. It should not take you more than a couple of hours if you've got the idea of what it is you're looking for. So again, wanted to go ahead and announce that kind of in person as in person as we can get right now. And so I do share that with you, more information to come. We probably will then have an information session about that grant application. I intentionally waited to the end of this conversation so that didn't drive today's conversation, because that's not what today's conversation is about. But we have been very much appreciative of everybody's attention to coming into these meetings. Really do encourage you, if there's a topic that you'd like to talk about with your colleagues, to post that up to us and let us know. And we're happy to do a convening of a Zoom room. It's actually an amazing way to get a bunch of folks together on pretty brief notice and hopefully have a meaningful exchange and sharing of data and information. So with that, I very much appreciate all of your time and attention. I will not keep you any longer. But thank you so much for this evening. We will probably either post this recording or our 8 a.m. version of this meeting up on the web for any colleagues who you want to have heard what you heard today. But again, I will stop talking now and thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle.
Take care all.
Thank you.
Thank you.